Hi, I'm JB. This is the Polymer Podcast. Today I have with me CF.
What's up, guys? How you doing? My name is CF Krugen.
And we have Phil.
Hey, I'm Philip Arujo.
And we have Jen.
Hey, I'm Jen Voss.
All right. So we're rebooting the podcast, and we're going to do a Hangout on Air. So you can watch us when we do go live, and hopefully we're going to get that on a regular schedule. And today we're going to be talking about build systems, and I also have an announcement that I am, as of now, no longer working on Polymer.
Boo.
Yes.
That's cool. We've got a good transitioning period for you, right? So what is it? You get one more episode, and then you're off the show?
I guess that's what happens.
I thought he was just going to hang up right after the announcement, and that was it.
Well, I mean, we lost William and we lost Dane, but I hope to stick around. I still think Polymer is amazing, and hopefully maybe I can use it in my day job. But
I'd like to hear your daily grumblings of like how you had to do a thing in some other language. You're like, oh no, not a language, another framework. You're like, oh no, I can't do it.
Yeah. We'll definitely have to talk about my experiences using other tools. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be working on, which exact project or thing I'm going to be working on yet. But I know that I'll be working on. I took a job with Automatic, and so I'll be working on WooCommerce, but I don't know specifically what I'll be doing.
Do you have an idea of the stack? I guess. Is it LAMP? Is it?
So WooCommerce is an e-commerce plugin for WordPress.
Okay. Right.
So it's the WordPress stack. LAMP. But that being said, they're I guess it's about months and months ago now. They released Calypso, which is available on GitHub. It's the new WordPress.com admin interface.
And Node, right?
So that's built using Node, React, and it's pretty amazing.
Very cool.
Which is also interesting because it gives me a good frame of reference to compare. Polymer and React are very much they're very similar in that they're both UI libraries, and they both are very component based. So that's super interesting. So once I get down into it, I'll be able to do some comparisons and talk about what's awesome about Polymer and what React does better and back and forth.
Very cool. And CF, where are you now?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm still at Comcast like I was before, but I'm going to be starting a new role pretty soon. I was working as a level 2 developer, and right when I was up for a promotion, another job came along within the company.
I think it's called a level up.
A level up. I was leveling up. I was so close. Another position came along that is a little bit closer to my roots. Back in the day, I was a graphic designer and would do a lot of interface design and stuff like that. And this job is going to be doing a lot of research for user experience and interaction design. So I'm going to be working with our UX team a lot and helping them actually build out some of their prototypes. So I'm going to be kind of bridging the gap between user interface design and development, so we can get stuff ready for to put in front of users, so it can be tested. We can get a lot of good data out of that, and prototyping is just a huge, awesome, cheap, and quick way to test out ideas, see if they're going to work, see if they're worth putting the investment of the dev time into. So I'm really looking forward to
throwing them completely away.
Throwing them completely away when they don't work.
Well, you hope you're going to throw them completely away.
Yeah. I think that's one of the cool parts about prototyping. It's like, I'm going to do all this, and yes, I might make it a little ugly, and it might be a bit hacky in the back end, but...
what do you mean? What do you mean might be hacky in the back end? It's going to be hacky in the back end.
But then after that, you kind of go, all right, now let's build it for real.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to writing some one-off type stuff that I don't have to do any unit tests or anything for. It's going to be very freeing for me. I'll get to be
you don't want to write unit tests.
I'll get to be very expressive.
So are you going to have anybody reviewing your code?
I'm hoping to, because it's never good to work in a vacuum. So if they don't have anyone else kind of in the same same work area as me, it's the first thing I'm going to push for.
So, question.
Mm-hmm.
Will you be using Polymer elements to build those prototypes?
There's absolutely no reason why I shouldn't, except I am looking forward to experimenting with other libraries to see what they have to offer. Because I've been working with Polymer for the past 1.5 years straight now, and I don't want to get too attached to one tool over the other. But I think there's a really good chance, at least at the beginning, that I'm going to be building most of my prototypes with Polymer.
Jen, mark that down. We need 2 open positions, okay? 2 open positions for the podcast.
Yeah. And so my other question would be, are these going to be high-fidelity prototypes, or are these just going to be, could you use material design to prototype these things?
I could do that, but with my design background, I do subscribe to all the psychology that goes into material design and a lot of the research that Google did with that. There's a lot that you can gain from the work that they've already done.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's going to be certain things that we're going to want to have our own branding and our own look on. So we'll see. It'll be a lot of fun.
Cool.
So should we talk about where we've been the past X months? It's kind of a sore topic, but
yeah. I mean, I've been applying to Automatic.
It was a month-long process.
Month-long?
We haven't recorded since.
Yeah, no.
It was right after the Dev Summit, wasn't it? Chrome Dev Summit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was our last one.
Unless you're just listening to these podcasts in order, then this was last week. Totally last week.
This is totally good for a binge listen, by the way. All of them.
Yeah. So yeah, like the idea is to bring it back, and we want to get on a more regular schedule. And since we get on a more regular schedule, we'll just do a hangout on air, and that way we can get it out super quick. And then we'll do some light editing and get it out on podcast. So we do have visuals. So if the podcast gets weird, just realize that we do have a hangout going. So why don't we talk about our topic?
What is our topic today?
Well, our topic today is all of the wonderful world of build tools.
Build tools?
Yeah, or anything that surrounds that, like any of the tools that you're using to take your raw, your Polymer and make it browser friendly.
All right. So do we have like a list of things we're gonna go through, or you just want to start rattling them off? Like, what do you have?
Well, let's start with. We do have a list. So
you're breaking the fourth wall, GB.
We're breaking the fourth wall. So we have a list. So why don't we start and talk about Polylint?
Let's do it.
So I have had a little bit of experience with Polylint, and I thought it was pretty awesome that it's going through and it's going to find all of those things that you don't do a great job of. So let's say you forget about doing your HTML imports. I am notorious for doing that and then spending 10 minutes and trying to figure out why my screen is white. So it's going to find all those great things for you.
So
is anybody else playing that?
Like what is? So give me a little bit more details on what those great things are.
So it's going to catch errors in your Polymer project before even running your code. So I don't know all of the things that it actually does, but it's fairly extensive in looking for.
Is it more like syntactical checks or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a JavaScript linter, and it's looking for the major things that you're doing wrong, and exposing them to you. And what's really nice is I added it to my Atom, and so I use Atom as my browser, and they have a package for the linter. You just install it, and it starts underlining all of your mistakes.
For just the imports alone that you mentioned, I'm pretty sure that might save me an hour of dev time every day, on average.
Yes,
there's so many times that I forget my import, and I'm sitting there trying to, like, racking my head, why is this not working? You know, I put like a console log or a debugger in a ready callback to see if my component's even there, and that I probably don't get to until about like 15 minutes or so. And then when I see that that's not happening, like, oh, it's the import.
Right.
Yeah.
I've had the issue with the opposite, where I've refactored something out and I left the component in, and then like weeks later I go back and I go, what is this doing here? And I'm trying to find the element, and it's just not there anymore. I'm like, oh crap, that's just sloppy on my part.
Does it do any detection of that?
I'm not sure.
That's used in the markup.
That's a really good experience with that.
Yeah, because I mean, that'd be kind of difficult for it to do, especially if you keep your JS separate from your markup.
Well, yeah, how does it handle?
So that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't actually put it in the markup, the component that you're importing, and you do document create element, whatever component, you know, it's not going to see that.
Yeah,
Right.
That's part of the problem. And I noticed that in the project that I was working on, we did a lot of things sort of odd. We had our SAS files we had our SAS in a separate file, and then during the build process we injected it, and that caused problems with the linter. It had problems. It had a couple problems with what we were doing, because we did things a little weird, and so I had to turn it off. So,
Well, how long ago was it you started using Polylint?
I only used it for a day or two, and this was 3 months ago, something. So it was a while back. But if you're using like the Polymer Starter Kit, which we'll talk about here in a minute, then Polylint's going to work because you're using the standard, all the standard things.
Yeah, I remember we tried to implement it. It was exceptionally hard to get it working because of our format. It was kind of like it was a big enough barrier that we went, we'll just be more diligent on our checking and our code review and stuff like that. So it's a shame we lost some of that automated tooling. But
Is that why you just kept it at your IDE level as opposed to building it into your actual build process?
Yes, and sort of.
It has
yes
like
and
a
no.
folder structure, right?
Yeah, well, our build process was was very custom, and so adding it into the build process might cause other issues, and spending the dev cycles on working that out it just didn't make sense. So
we'll get onto we'll talk about the build process that we have, because there's a lot of solutions coming up that are going to make that way easier.
Yeah, well, why don't we talk about that?
Okay, we could talk about that. I mean, that doesn't abide by the list, but okay. I mean, what I was talking about is there's is it Polytool, I believe, Polytool, which is essentially taking a lot. Let's talk about that at the end, because it talks about some of the other things. Yeah, I don't want to give all the good stuff out.
Okay, well, what's Polygit, Phil?
Oh, so this is the Polymer CDN, right? This is the idea that it's kind of a helper for you to test a lot of things like in JSBin or CodePen or some other online editor. But the idea is you essentially have access to reference or resources on a CDN somewhere, and you could just import them as you would any other component, but it's already kind of done for you. It's been pre-packaged. So a lot of what they say is you use a base rel tag or a base tag, and essentially it will let all your other links be relative to that. So now you could just use their Polymer CDN. Have you guys used much of it, or?
No, I haven't. Not at all.
No, I haven't either.
No, I played with it, but again, yeah, haven't used it for anything serious.
I
It's an amazing idea because that means that I can within an organization I could set something up. So the whole idea behind this is I could set it up in my organization and then pull in have all of my components for my organization see the end. So let's say something like Comcast. There's probably going to be users that are using a lot of different Comcast sites. So having them use those components across across the organization causes a lot less things that they have to download.
So you're talking about Polygit as if it was an enterprise solution, which
Yeah.
I think there's a really cool idea behind that. I've wanted to look at a way to kind of dynamically create import bundles using something like a Google Fonts URL schema. You know, you could provide like use fonts, Arial and this other one, and it will send you back a single bundle. It'd be cool to do the same thing with web components where you can say, I need iron selector and I need whatever, and it essentially builds those bundles for you and returns it, and it's cached and it's optimized, blah, 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 blah. But it's the work is done for you, and you don't really have to worry about having to host these things and have them part of your your build process. You just have to worry about your stuff. And with HTTP2, I mean, that's the dream, right? Having small pieces that are somebody else's hosting coming from different places, and that'd be really nice.
Yeah, you said the key word there, HTTP2.
Mm-hmm.
So when we no longer have to vulcanize and concat, all the things down into these bundles, it makes things a lot easier because we don't have to worry about figuring out the most optimal bundles.
Right.
And HTTP2 is going to make Polymer so much more powerful, and I'm really excited when that becomes the case.
Well, web components in general.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I'm pretty excited about that future.
Yeah, and the starter kit, does it include a lot of these tools that we're talking about? Or is that part of its package?
No, some of them, yes. So wait, before we go on, I just wanted to talk about HTTP2. Yeah, so browser support. IE11 partial.
Okay, getting there.
Edge. Yes, good. It's green. Firefox green, Chrome green, Safari partial, Opera green, iOS Safari green.
Oh.
That's weird.
Was that weird?
Because
it's not in.
Yeah, why would iOS Safari be green and desktop Safari be sort of?
I wonder if they have a quicker release schedule for them. Or I wouldn't think so though, because they typically release their
it's tied to the
browsers
operating system.
Yeah.
And then Chrome for Android is green, but Android browser not so much, and we're going to be stuck with IE11 for a while. So I think we're going to be stuck with the the partial support in IE.
I wonder what's the part that's missing?
Yeah, I think maybe we could explore that in another podcast.
Partial support in IE11 refers to being limited to Windows 10.
Oh, there you go.
That's not too bad.
It's a. Sorry, Steve. Sorry to cut you off. But the good thing is, if it doesn't support it, it's okay. It just uses HTTP. I mean, it's at a cost, but there's ways to make the server react to that instead. Like you could essentially have a bundled package and an unbundled package, and depending on what the request is and whether the server supports it, swap it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So JB, what about HTTP2 is going to make Polymer and web components more powerful? Is it just allowing the imports to be?
Yeah, it means that it means that you don't have to bundle things up anymore.
Okay.
So there is a connection pool. So in each browser, the number is a little bit different. It's anywhere from 4 to I think 16 in some browsers.
Okay.
So you can only have 4 to 16 simultaneous connections to a single host, and so that means that if I have 200 web components that I need to download, and each of those has a CSS file, and each of those has a JavaScript file. So you get me here.
Yeah, so they
have 600
getting queued up and
600 files, and you can only download 8 at a time. And so what a lot of people, what happens is you either push them out to several different hosts so that you get more connections, or you use Vulcanize, the tool we'll be talking about in a minute here, to bundle them, take all of those things and turn them into a couple files. And so the idea is, what do they call it when you take all of your images and you put them into one? Spriting?
Spriting.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like that's Sprite for source files.
Yeah. So you can cat all your files together. You sprite all your images. You take all your CSS and you smush it down. And so when HTTP2 is around, you don't have to worry about that anymore. The browser can simultaneously get all of those things, and HTTP2 it'll know what the browser is going to ask for and just send those things down.
Essentially keeps the connection open, because what happens is when you make a request, right? You want X asset. It has to send the header to actually open the connection. Open the connection, comes back, and then it says, "Okay, I'm ready to do its thing." And then there's a process of transferring it, and when that asset's done, it closes it off. HTTP2, man, that's a tough one.
They can call it something else.
HTTP2, what that does is it will open the connection, keep it open, and then stream everything through, and then close it when it's finally done. So you don't get that 300 millisecond transaction at the start of every single connection. It's typically like 300 milliseconds for mobile, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, makes everything faster, makes everything awesome. So that's totally great. But with web components and all of these things being separate files, it'll make that super quick, and you don't have to worry about nearly as much build stuff. It simplifies a lot of the build process.
It remedies a lot of going back to build. Like we've kind of dug ourselves into a hole in Node and in our JavaScript build processes where we do so much processing to take these gigantic asset bundles and slap them together into something more, concrete, smaller, faster, gzipped up the wazoo, and that's a lot of, I guess, build tooling overhead that has to be done. So I see it as being a positive for the web, but also being a positive for the development of those assets.
Not to mention, it should help us out a lot when we have issues like there's a bug that shows up only in the prod version of an app, in the production version that's hosted and built and vulcanized and all that. You've got to go digging through all that code to see if you can kind of untangle what was kind of all concatenated together to see if you can zero in on where the problem is.
That is currently very painful with Polymer. Like the giant, megalodon of source code, right? And we're like, hey, where's all of my JavaScript? Oh, it's up here somewhere, and it's kind of rough.
Yeah, it's like being given a pair of salad tongs to find what gene makes my beard be red. Like, I've got to dig through my gene sequence with these salad tongs now. Here we go.
I'm probably gonna have to use that analogy. I won't change any of the wording though.
It's totally true, but that's not just a Polymer thing. There's been a lot of backlash against using the ES 2015-2016 compiling down to JavaScript and using bundler, browserify, and all of these tools, and that's the whole JavaScript fatigue situation that we've gotten ourselves in, is that the build tools are so complex that it makes it really, really difficult for people to understand. And I think that that's one of the great things about Polymer is that it is very simple. It's very easy to look at. And when you don't have to do these hugely complex build systems, then it makes it easier to use.
Right. So I know you talked about Vulcanize. Do you want to go into details?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you've worked on that a bit more than I have, but I'll start off with it. Well, so the idea with Vulcanize is you point it at your project and you say, "Hey, Vulcanize, I want you to take all of."
First name Vulcan, last name Eyes.
So Vulcan Eyes, I need you to take all these different files, and I need you to, here's the top level, Polymer element I have. Figure out, what that element needs, and work your way down the tree, and take all of those Polymer elements and put them into one HTML file. And so then, the browser only has to go get one HTML file. It's great. It does all the things, includes them, and it's great.
How does it sort? I guess. So I have a component, I have a component that includes two other components that include the same component. How does it sort that shenanigans?
Yeah, I mean, so it's expecting that both of those, that if it's including the same element, that element is the same. So it automatically dedupes. So it's only going to include that element in once, which is
okay.
Yeah.
So does it just move it to like the top of the stack or something? I'm assuming it's kind of like a dependency tree resolver almost, where it goes through your elements. It's going to say these things are all shared, but it happens to be that this is shared by other things, so it gets a much higher priority. It's much higher in the tree, and then it renders it that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that works. I haven't actually dove into the internals. I mean, I've set it up to work a bunch of times, but never actually gone in and looked at how it actually does the dedupe.
Yeah, I've never really looked at the ordering. I do know that it does separate the JavaScript from the HTML. Like if you have a component that includes JavaScript within it, it will actually take that JavaScript and rip it out of the HTML, and then it will rearrange it. I'm trying to remember whether it takes all the JavaScript and brings it up, and then the markup. It's a good question. If only there was a way to test that really quick while everybody waited.
Nope.
Oh, well.
All right. So, moving on.
Well, I have another thought about that. So, the good thing about Vulcanize is that it pulls in all your imports. So, any third-party things like Polymer components that you might have, when you Vulcanize that, if you have your Bower components at the same level as your app, once you Vulcanize that, they're all in the same file, so you can just dump that one file right in your distributed folder and deploy that.
Right.
The bad thing about that is that if you want to run other processes on just your code, like Babel or anything like that, if you run that just on the vulcanized file, then you're also going to be running it on your third-party stuff, which sucks.
Right.
So what I've had to do is strip out the like all of our vendor components, Polymer libraries and things like that, run Vulcanize on basically twice. So on my vendor components and my app components, so that I can run other processes on it, and then eventually dump them into the same file.
Oh, I see. I thought there was a tool that's, well, oh man, there's so many tools. I think there's one called CRISPR, which allows you to take your vulcanized output, run it through the CRISPR, which is essentially a cross-server. Oh boy, hold on, I'm gonna remember this. It's cross-server policy, I believe, and it separates that single HTML with JavaScript and markup, and it converts it into an HTML asset and a JavaScript asset. And I think you'd be able to run your processes from that, but then that would be all vendor and your code.
Yes. So it's going to split your inline scripts from the HTML, and so, but it's also going to do that for your vendor assets. So what we did is we ran all of the processes before we ran Vulcanize. So we went through, we had a folder and said, all the Java, all the HTML in this folder, run all of these processes on that thing before we ran it through Vulcanize.
You're talking about like importing the separated Sass and all that?
Well, our linting, our style checking, we're not really doing much.
Internationalization.
Yeah.
And
we're not doing any Babelifying or anything like that. So that's a good thing. Oh, that's unfortunate, but that's because that's what it is. But yeah, you would essentially run all your processes before the vulcanization.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because it creates an extra step, and then you also have to have a separate folder to house all of that. Like if you are running Babel, which we are, you'd have to have another folder to house your compiled stuff.
Can you just pipe it through?
No, because once it creates the vulcanized asset, the vulcanized creates an HTML file. Although no, that's not true. It's a pipe, right? It's essentially a stream. At the end, you format. Yeah, I think you might be able to pipe it into another process.
You can pipe it, but it gets complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of this, like the stuff we're talking about, is it's being reworked in like the new processes, because there is some kind of developer contention with so many options and so many ways to do it. That's kind of hard to fully understand the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, especially when once you get down the road and once you have a build process, once you've built your build process, then the idea is that you change it very little once it's in place.
And they do have a starter kit for that. Have we talked much about the starter kit?
Well, I don't think we've talked about the starter kit.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to? Do it.
Do it. Have you used it, Jed?
I have not used it.
I have used it, but it kind of did a lot more than I wanted it to do, so I ended up scrapping it and just starting from scratch.
That is a common thing I hear.
I know that they've reworked it a little bit, or they're working on simplifying it, but it was just way too much for what I needed.
So it's in process it's in process being reworked as we speak. But what Polymer Starter Kit is it's a downloadable bundle, and you can download the beginner or the intermediate version. The beginner version already has all of the Bower all the dependencies are included in that zipped up folder. So you don't have to worry about Node, you don't have to worry about Bower. All of those things are already, they're sort of just abstracted away from you. But the intermediate version, it uses Node and it uses Bower, and I believe it's using Gulp. Sorry, yes, to run a bunch of different processes so that it does vulcanization for you. It does concatenating, image optimization. It does HTML optimization.
I believe it also does some server worker stuff.
Yeah, there's some.
Well, it is, I think, commented out, but there is a guide to kind of get that going.
Yeah, you can very easily include the service worker.
I'm not going to say easily. It is a little bit of work. That was part of my, I guess, complaints with the starter kit. It is a very opinionated view, and it's kind of like, here's my whole world kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that you might not need. So I typically don't like using any of the paper elements, but that kind of gets bundled in there as well.
Right.
A structure isn't exactly what I want, which I'm okay with it in a starter kit. I can modify the structure, but there's a lot of tied opinions in there. So if you want to change your structure, you've got to remove assets, move assets, do a bunch of stuff. I ended up kind of writing my own whatever it was, right? Some kind of starter kit.
You did write your own starter kit, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that was kind of more like using gulp as registries and making it more so more configuration over convention, as opposed to where the starter kit is more convention over configuration.
So I actually do remember using this a little bit at a workshop up at Google Developer Group. God, I guess that was about 2 years or so ago now.
That was Polymer 0.5.
Polymer 0.5, yeah. And I remember it kind of feeling like...
about that Polymer.
I have fond memories of Polymer 0.5, but I kind of remember getting the feeling that like a lot of decisions were made for me with Polymer Starter Kit. And it's like you kind of get this precognition of like how it is supposed to work without really being able to like explore everything it can do, like with all those decisions being made.
Right.
So I think what's really powerful about the Polymer Starter Kit is that someone can jump in and those decisions have already been made for you. And so when you're doing a Polymer Polytechnic, someone who maybe isn't as advanced as, I mean, Phil jumps in and he's like, oh, I don't like the way that works. But someone, a beginner they need that. They need to be told what to do, because if they aren't, they're going to flounder setting all these things up. So it already has like a base template layout. It has a router in there so that you can do single page application style things. It uses page.js, which is pretty great. I've used that. That's really good. It has unit testing already set up with the web component tester. It's very easy to set up the service worker. You could do, it already has Vulcanize set up for you. And then it has recipes for ES 2015 support, which I actually found was a good bit difficult, but I think there's been some pull requests since then.
I did find that hard to actually implement as well. Not hard, it's just there's a lot of steps to it. And typically when there's a lot of steps, it's error prone, right?
Yeah.
I think that could have been written better to be more configuration over.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that I was sort of like, yeah, we'll throw that in there because some people are going to want it, but the idea is that if anybody's going to be, the idea behind this is to show people the possibilities and not use this as this is how you should start a brand new project, because everybody's going to have their own opinion and there's going to be a lot of things that you're not going to need, but this gives you an example of how things could be, and I think that that's the power of it.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I guess I wasn't necessarily the intended audience for it when it came out. But yeah, I mean, through like teaching classes and stuff, I've noticed it's very valuable to kind of take care of a lot of the stumbling blocks for people ahead of time so that they can start to see some immediate results with what they're playing with and get kind of that instant gratification that hooks you so that you don't hit a stumbling block and just stop looking at it altogether. And app routing, I think, is one of the stronger things that they put in there that can really be a problem for people trying to make a single-page application.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things that they hit.
Right.
And it's super easy to work with, so it's pretty powerful. So
I think all that stuff is kind of a double-edged sword, though, because when I download the starter kit, I mean, I know what all this stuff is doing because I've worked with Polymer before, but for someone just coming in and seeing like all the stuff in there, it can be overwhelming, saying like, I just need an index file and that's it. Or in my component file, there's a ton of stuff in there that they wouldn't need.
Right, and that could be hurtful if you're not fully educating and just like, hey, this just works. Because it's kind of like the jQuery situation. A few years ago, everybody knew how to use jQuery. They didn't know how to use native JavaScript, and it's kind of that abstraction layer is too much almost. So it's good to know how the inner pinnings work.
So I'd like to sort of make a slight segue here. Ember so Ember has an API that when you want to build an Ember application, you can you use their API. You go to the command line tool. You install this command line tool, and you say, Ember new component, Ember, do this, Ember do that, and it does all those fancy things for you. And that sort of comes from the Ruby on Rails mentality, that to quickly build all of these things, there's 80% of it's boilerplate. So let's just get rid of that boilerplate and have a command line tool. Yeah, so let's get the scaffolding going.
So you mentioned, in your propaganda of Ember spiel there, you did mention command line. I appreciate you trying to derail this podcast there, be real nice.
Well, no. And then I was going to say Angular, in Angular 2.0, they're going to have a command line tool.
So with that, they're actually, the Poly tool repo, that actually is their command line tool. This is in the works. Actually, it's getting a lot of recent development, but you can go and find this tool. There's not much documentation for it right now, but they are getting towards the idea of having a command line tool to run your app, test your app, lint your app, and initialize a project. Now, I don't know whether they're going to do the generator way, where you could actually just spit out a component by running the tool as well. That would be pretty neat.
Well, there isn't a init that you can do in that. I was looking at it. I mean, it seems a little sparse right now, but this could be definitely a huge helpful thing. Probably could be baked into the Polymer starter kit, once it's fully fledged.
That seems what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think it somewhat replaces some of those things, and being able to do all that stuff I think it's going to be pretty powerful. I like the idea of, so there's two ways of thinking about Polymer. There's Polymer as, I want to build a component to do one specific thing, and maybe let's take the example of GitHub. So GitHub's been using web components. They have a time web component that just handles time, and the new reactions in GitHub, those are a web component. So it's just one specific piece of UI. Then on the other side of that, I want to build an application with Polymer. And how do you handle that dichotomy because they're very different use cases. So how does that work, right? So with a command line tool, you can do both, and your user can do both. With a starter kit, it doesn't work that way, unless you have two starter kits, one for each thing, and then someone's confused. Well, which one do I use? So I think one command line tool to rule them all will be pretty powerful.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to actually take all those. It'd be cool to take all those repos that they have and actually consolidate it into a single formulated idea. Because there's been a lot of I know Vulcanize and CRISPR they do different things, but it's kind of the same idea of taking content and reducing it. And PolyBuild is essentially CRISPR and clean, or PolyClean, which is just cleaning the HTML. There's a lot of poly repos, and it's kind of like, oh great, which one do I use? In which order do I use them? So it's kind of like, all right, well let's ignore this. Here's the entry point for all that.
Yeah, totally with you. So now that we've talked about some of those, some of the very Polymer specific, I think we can talk about some of the tools that we've used on a regular basis. I think we may be running out of time here, but I think we can go through some of those real quickly. Let's talk about JS-CS and JS Hint. We've used those, and when I came onto the project with Phil, I said, "Hey, what are we doing? Is there a style guide?" He's like, "Well, it's a brand new project. We've got a style guide, but we're trying to make, during a code review is when you ensure the style guide is being enforced," and we both agreed that was going to be really, really tough. And so he and I started implementing JSCS as well as JSHint to go in and check for that. And we used, just for simplicity's sake, and I was amazed at how easily we were able to agree on the Google style guide for JavaScript.
There's nothing to agree on. It's just I mean, we could spend the time and go back and forth and find out what is best for the team, and I think we did do that for a while.
And people, well, no, I mean, like, you and I and Chris agreed on the Google style guide, and then other people came on and started arguing. I was like, man, we're not bike shedding this. This is a decided thing. You get on board, and this is the way it is.
For me, it was just refreshing to have a voice saying, we need a style guide. Like,
yeah, you're a big advocate for that, JB, which is I love that.
Like, just choose one and go with it. To me, it really kind of doesn't matter. As long as everybody's on the same page, you're going to have a uniform code base that is touched by multiple people, and that's really kind of hard to come by. Plus, I've had some people who have started looking through the code base that I've been working in, and since we've implemented a style guide and we've used it pretty much throughout the entirety of the project, other people who are subscribing to some of the components we've created are looking through the code and they're like, this is amazingly clean, like I know how to get through this. Having a high standard like that really makes things a lot more usable in the future.
Yeah, I don't care what we decide on as long as it's a decision we enforce, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the good things we did with we decided on a code style, we decided on a folder structure, we decided on a naming structure, we decided on the BEM syntax, which we worst decision we did. However, it is consistent. We decided on it. We were consistent with it, and now our repo is actually super clean. It's easy to work with. We know exactly where everything is.
So the one thing that is absolutely paramount is when you get that style guide, is you have to back it up with tooling. Because if you don't back it up with tooling,
right,
people get lazy. And so JSCS and JSHint are great tools for doing that. ESLint is an amazing tool that does all of that. That uses plugins. Babel now has a plugin syntax, so you can do a lot of those things with Babel.
So you prefer ESLint over JSHint, or
I haven't used it. I've heard that ESLint is pretty darn powerful, and then I think
I've used ESLint. Like it is extremely powerful. Like it's impressively powerful. So where the difference is where JSHint, you kind of say something is on or off, like commas after something, whatever.
You can configure it to exactly what you want.
Yeah, ESLint will be like, okay, fine, you can allow this scenario, but with these exceptions.
And it's nice that it gives you that freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
JSCS has merged with ESLint, so use ESLint.
Cool. There you go.
JSHint is very opinionated on what it does and does not check for. It checks for syntax. It checks for JavaScript things like, am I using usestrict? Am I assigning variables inside of a for loop? A lot of the things that you shouldn't do. That's what JSHint checks for.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are important, and most of us, like, over time, stop doing those terrible things. The most important for the style guide is the ESLint stuff that you can do in addition to that stuff. Now, ESLint has plugins to check for all of those, JSHint stuff. So JSHint, JSLint, all that stuff. So it's got plugins. It's a plugin architecture, so you can make it do whatever you want it to do.
And you've got your IDE tools for it. Plus, you have, you can set it up for pre-commit just to make sure, people can't get things into the code base unless it's being checked.
Yeah. So let's talk about those pre-commit. So what are pre-commit hooks?
Pre-commit hooks are basically just processes that get run as you commit files, and they go through a verification process to make sure that everything passes. And if it doesn't pass, it'll give you an error and show you what it is and make you fix it before it actually allows you to commit anything.
I like to think of pre-commit hooks as little tiny fills that negative to me before the real fill can.
That
Yes.
is quite accurate.
Mini fills. And what's really
Think about how much time that has saved you, Phil, from this.
Yeah, oh, that is true. That's true.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff.
Ironically, though, not too long ago, I accidentally turned my pre-commit hook off, and I got a crap of just a bunch of bad stuff in, and I had forgotten to turn it back on, and then people were like negative twoing me, and it was a very big deal.
Or you broke the build.
Yeah,
I did break
because-
the build actually. Yeah.
Because so you're not just running these. So you have to run these things in your pre-commit hooks, right? So if you look inside your .git folder inside of your project, it'll have a hooks folder. Look inside of there, and you'll see you just put a bash file in there that says pre-commit. It's named pre-commit, and you just run a bash script. So then once you get it up to your server or whatever you're using, your build tool then needs to rerun all of these things, because we can't count on an individual developer having those pre-commit hooks. Right. Now you can. This is the trick. In a corporate setting, you can install a person's hooks on the npm install, which is the ideal way to do it, because then developers, they have to be installed. In the open source world, I'm pretty sure people might be a little upset if you installed pre-commit hooks on an open source project.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know how people would feel about that, but that would be the ideal situation.
That's typically left up to Travis or some other post-commit. It's a post-commit hook instead of a pre-commit hook.
Yeah.
Yeah, but somebody could always disable it too, which is why it should always run on the build process anyway, just in case.
Okay. So.
Maybe we talked about Gulp a little bit. I don't know if we have to. Gulp is the tool, right? On top of, next to Node, it is as important. Well, I don't want to make that statement either. I was going to say it's as important as Node, and that's just not true.
No, and I think you're almost entirely wrong there.
So for the JavaScript front-end developer, Gulp and Grunt is extremely important these days.
Yes, but Browserify and Bundler, when you use those tools, you're not even using Gulp or Grunt. So
you could. It really depends on.
You could. It depends on the build system, but.
Gulp is essentially a task runner, so it takes a specific task and it will, process. So what you do is you load a set number of files and you convert them into streams, and Gulp will essentially run processes against each one of those streams or a single stream, and then the beauty of Gulp is it continues as a stream until you no longer want it as a stream, and you can dump it into a file system and then try not to, but you can also manipulate it after the fact. So it gives you the benefit of speed. And
it's also asynchronous, whereas Grunt is synchronous. I've seen a lot of systems that have used Grunt, and you get really huge configuration files in Grunt. That's all JavaScript objects. I think it's really tedious. Grunt, I've seen Grunt build processes get so large that they're really unmaintainable. And there are ways of making them maintainable, but a lot of times they just get out of control. And I like the idea of using npm scripts. I think that's really great, as well as using makefiles.
I think we need to get back to that kind of ideology, because the Gulp Grunt stuff is just so many processes and files and repos that have to be included to do everything.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we could probably have a whole show on just that stuff.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So you know, I think that we're.
Another good thing, I definitely. So, have you guys done much with icons? So,
Yes.
Jen, you have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you loading your icons? Okay, well, let's start with how do you receive your icons from UX?
So we receive a single SVG file from UX for each icon, which we have a folder that they all live in individually, and we use a gulp process to take all those icons and compile them into a single file into an iron icon set.
Okay, that's actually very similar to what we're doing. We're using something like SVG Store, which is essentially just going through that folder of SVG icons and creating some kind of hash table and then dumping it into that similar, home icon set. So
Yeah, I think we're doing the same thing.
yeah, we tried a lot of solutions for that, but I think that's the one that stuck the most. The simplicity of just being able to run a single command to actually do all that, and not having to worry about actually manually copying the SVG data around is better.
Yeah, and we also use the same process to compile the demo for all the icons so that you can just hit the demo page and see them all listed at once.
Very cool. We should start wrapping it up because I don't think we have much time.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
So.
Do we have picks?
Yeah, let's do some picks. We haven't done picks in a long time.
We're ready for picks. I'll start. I'm going to do a single pick. I'm going to do two picks. And I've done this one before, but it's so great. The Adventure Zone, definitely listen to that one. That's fantastic. That podcast is amazing. But there is a new podcast called by Griffin McElroy. Yeah.
McElroy.
Called Cool Games Inc., which is they week to week they take Twitter suggestions for games, which are often absurd, and they try to shop that pitch to an actual game executive or someone within their organization. So they'll go take a horrible idea like watching basketball but not really playing, and they try to build a game around that. So it's pretty good.
Okay, I've got two picks that kind of go hand in hand. In the spirit that I am going to be shifting into more of a user experience and research role, I'm going to throw out the book Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. It is all about decision making and strategy for coming up with user interface designs. And one of the key things that he talks about is paper prototyping, which leads me into my second pick, which is PopApp. That's POPAPP.com, and it stands for Prototyping on Paper. It's this awesome little smartphone app that you can sketch out an interface on a piece of paper, snap a picture of it with the phone, and use it to build different views that you can navigate through to create a very quick, rough prototype of a user interface so you can get it in front of users much more quickly in your development process and see if you've made some good user experience decisions or bad user experience decisions that you can go back and tweak before you spend all the money and all the dev hours on building something that's probably going to end up as a flop.
Awesome. So I'll go. So my first pick is The Year Without Pants, WordPress.com and the Future of Work. It's a book by Scott Birkin. And so he joined Automatic and worked there for 18 months and then left and wrote a book about his experience. And having just started, reading that book was really great. I'm sure a lot has changed since he was there. But working remote is my second pick. I've been working remote for the past two and a half weeks, and it feels pretty darn great.
Now you're just rubbing it in.
I've worn pants every single day. I will say that.
But have you worn a shirt?
Oh yeah, I've definitely worn a shirt. Definitely worn a shirt. So those are my two picks, and Jen, you're up.
All right, I've been furiously trying to find this link, and I can't find it. But it was a link a while back to an article about how web pages are just generally way too bloated nowadays. and just way too heavy in file size. And every time I load a page with a giant hero image that takes forever to download, it just kind of like really grinds my gears, and I think about that article. So I try to keep that in mind whenever I develop something and say, you know, how can we make this as small as possible and reduce the overall size so that people loading this on mobile or wherever don't have to download as much stuff. So I'll find the article and we can put it in the show notes.
Oh, that would have been a really good segue right into progressive web apps, which we totally have to have a talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. So we will see you next week.
Yeah, if you want to get in touch with us, go ahead and contact us at polymerpodcast@gmail.com or hit us up at Twitter. Totally failing on this outro. We'll do it again, guys.
No, this is live.
Wait, I've got our outro. JB,
All right.
I'm very proud.
You know what? I'm gonna leave this in, but you do it, CF. Go for it.
I'm very proud of you for wearing pants, JB. I just have to say that.
I'm pretty proud of me as well.
I second that.
It takes a lot.
Find us on Twitter at polymerpodcast.com. Or, damn it, screw that one up.
Polymer-podcast.com?
Yeah, find us on Twitter at Polymer Podcast. We'll edit that out.
Goodbye. Adios.
Later. Kill the life. Kill the life.